forward and do some intros. So welcome everyone. Again, I'm Graham Richmond. I'm the co-founder of ClearAdmit, and I'm going to be your moderator today, walking you through. There's not too much to say about me. I don't think you really need to know too much, except that I'm going to, as I said, try to get out of the way and let our guests share their insights on consulting and banking jobs. So let's move forward and first introduce Keith Bevins, who is the Global Head of Consultant Recruiting at Bain Company. So welcome, Keith. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, good to be here.
And next up, we have Lauren Burney. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And Lauren is the Vice President and Head of Firm-Wide MBA Recruiting for JP Morgan. So welcome, Lauren.
Thanks, great to be here.
It's great to have you. So we're going to dive right in. We have a couple of roundtable questions. And so, Lauren, I want to start with you since I can see you on screen here. I just want to know, what do you enjoy about recruiting MBA students and grads for jobs?
Everything. I have had the opportunity to recruit analysts, MBA student, MBA associates, PhD students, and this is to take no offense to any of those other populations, but recruiting MBAs is bar none my favorite. The reason for that is the MBA students really bring a degree of professional maturity to the recruiting process that is hard to find in some other levels that we're recruiting for. So I find it very easy to engage and connect with the MBAs, and it's always just a really, really enjoyable process.
Great. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I know one of the things that business school professors always talk about is they love the amount of experience that candidates bring into the classroom. And so clearly that's going to showcase itself on the other side when they go looking for jobs too. So excellent feedback. Keith, how about you? What do you like about recruiting MBA students and grads?
Yeah, the thing that I enjoy most is the diversity of people that we meet on campus. When we go to campus, we're meeting people that are typically at an inflection point in their career. They've chosen to leave the workforce for 1 or 2 years and make a pretty significant investment in most cases in their own education and development. And so what's been really great is you meet people and you sort of start to get a sense of where Bain fits into their career journey or could fit into their career journey, and help them build their own Bain and think about well, if they were to join us, what types of experiences they want to accumulate as part of this as they build the mosaic of their entire career. And so for me, the diversity of people and interests is fascinating. As somebody who invests really heavily in people's professional development, it's one of the passions that I have, and it's part of our culture as a firm. That really starts with recruiting, and you start really helping people figure out what they want to be when they grow up. And that's really cool.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point too. And I will say I used to wear a different hat as an admissions officer at the Wharton School. And that's what I love too. Reading these files about candidates, everyone's so different in business school. And there's so many different folks represented from all over the world, every possible industry. So that definitely makes sense. All right, so moving along, Keith, I want to stay with you. And I just wanted you, if you could give us the kind of 30,000 foot overview of how your MBA recruiting process works. And this would be both for kind of first year MBAs who are looking for a summer internship, as well as those who are going to graduate for full-time jobs.
Yeah, and so I will give the very, very short version, because I know Lauren will want to share as well. The processes tend to be pretty involved. Right from when people get admitted, so people who are just getting admitted right now to business school to enroll this fall, we're running our Experience Bain program. Now they can go to our website and search for Experience Bain and register. And we start running content to get to know the firm, get to know our people, and get to know the type of work that we do and how we're different, starting basically in May, late May, early June. And that runs through the summer. And what we find is that some people come to that stuff and go, that's amazing, that's exactly what I want. And other people go, wow, that's really cool, I want no part of that. And which is great. And then that allows them to focus on things that are going to be a better fit for their goals when they get to campus in the fall. So that program runs through the summer. And then for first years, MBA internship recruiting typically starts late September, mid-October. And then they interview in January. They apply December deadline, interview in January, and then we're sort of set to go for the following summer. For second years, so as you continue the journey through business school, MBA recruiting tends to start right away. So you sort of put down your food from the Labor Day barbecue and submit your resume, and that process happens quite fast. And that process typically is applications are in September, interviews and everything is wrapped up by the end of October typically. But for people going to business school this fall, the education part of what we do starts now. Registration is open for Experience Bain on our website as of, I think, 2 weeks ago.
Okay, yeah, that's a terrific summary. Lauren, how about you? Because I know it may not be identical, right, on the finance side of things. So tell us about JP Morgan.
Sure. Yeah, definitely some similarities, but I would say our process is very traditional. And what I mean by traditional is we are on campus, as Keith was saying, we start to go on campus or start our recruiting process September. We do education, attraction, all the way through November, December timeframe, and we interview in January. Something I will say though is that our internship program is our biggest feeder into our full-time class. So we do every year at the end of the summer, we do have some what we call top-up needs, meaning candidates who either decided they didn't want to join us full-time or candidates who didn't receive an offer. We will have some needs. Those tend to be pretty minimal. So on our side of the house, I would say that the best way to get your foot in the door is definitely through that internship program.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's great feedback. And we actually, there's a question later on about this, because I think it's something that's on a lot of people's mind about like how important is the summer. So we'll get into that maybe even a bit more later on too. Let's move on though, and just talk about, we have another kind of roundtable, and this one's kind of the elephant in the room. I noted you guys keep talking about going to campus, and I can't help but think about this stuff. So let's talk about COVID, and what does it mean for hiring, and what's the current situation like? Are MBAs that are working for you remote? I presume they are, but yeah, to the extent that you can kind of walk us through, and let's start with you, Lauren. Just tell us a little bit about the impact of the pandemic, and to the extent that you can maybe even forecast a little bit about what someone starting business school this fall might expect, because I feel like things might go a little bit back more towards normal, but just want to hear your point of view on this.
Sure. So I'll start with your last question first. We're hearing from many of our career partners and schools that obviously you all are attending this fall. We're hearing from a lot of them that they're expecting some semblance of normalcy. What I mean by that is allowing employers to actually be on campus, which we feel for your population is really important. Last year, I'll talk a little bit about how we pivoted. We, on the analyst side of the house at JP Morgan, we've largely migrated to virtual recruiting, given the volume, the volume of the analyst population that we recruit. We feel very strongly that the MBAs are in a very different boat, and the MBAs expect it's almost like a courtship. It's a white glove process, really, and I can tell you it was extremely difficult to try to do that in a virtual environment. I'm sure Keith will agree. But when you don't have a choice, you don't have a choice. So we had to get really, really resourceful, really creative. And I have to give our hats off to the students that we recruited, because everyone that we were recruiting was completing their first year of their MBA in a remote setting, just as we were all remote. But to have to go to events at night, in a Zoom setting, talk about Zoom fatigue. I give them so much credit. They showed a lot of resilience. They were just incredibly adaptable, which is great. So needless to say, we made it work, just as I'm sure Keith did. Every company had to make it work, but we wouldn't have been able to do that without the candidates being so agreeable. And quite frankly, without our partner schools having an understanding of the situation. I will say that our partner schools, we, even if we were allowed to go to campus per state and local guidelines, the students were not physically on campus, most of them. So as I said, we really didn't have a choice. How are the MBAs doing? Those who interned with us last year, we had a great conversion rate. We made offers to almost everyone who interned with us, even though they were virtual, and almost everyone accepted. So I think that's a testament to us and being able to deliver a virtual internship program. Proud to say that this year we're actually hosting our interns, most of our interns in person to the extent possible. So what that means is per state and local guidelines, we have to adhere to, for example, if it's 50% capacity in San Francisco in the office, it's likely that there will be some sort of a rotational schedule, but we feel strongly that having people in person is ideal and best.
Got it. That's helpful. Keith, how have things been over at Bain with respect to COVID, and what does it mean for hiring this coming year?
Yeah, so a couple of things that were important for us. First, keeping our people safe was priority number one. There was no question about it for us that both in recruiting, but with our client work and with our employees, we took a very conservative approach to COVID. We were among the first to sort of take our team off the field and say, we're working from home starting now. And we saw the sort of unfolding of it because of our Asia offices sort of going through it first. So we saw what was coming a few weeks ahead because of the way things unfolded in January and February. We also, very quickly pivoted to, not just committing to a full 10-week internship program last summer, but we also committed to giving all of our summer associates automatic full-time offers, which we did again this year. We felt like it was, at the time, it's hard to believe that it's been 15 months, but last April and March, as people were thinking about their summer plans after having accepted what they thought was the offer that would unlock all kinds of doors, people didn't know whether or not they'd be safe. They didn't know how they would be able to perform at a level to get an internship and get the full-time offer while taking care of family members and working remotely and doing all of those things. We said, you know what? We're a supportive enough culture that we're going to invest in you, and we don't want that to be the barrier that keeps you up at night. And so we committed to a full 10-week program. We did the global training program. We did it all remotely. As Lauren said, it was a quick pivot, but we offered a global experience for our training. We offered the full 10-week internship, and we told people, you have the offer. If your circumstances don't allow you to participate in the summer, don't. You have the offer. But you worked hard to get that offer, and we want to deliver the experience that you worked so hard for. And we did that last summer. This summer will be no different. Last summer was our largest SA program ever as a firm. This summer it's bigger. So hiring is totally fine. And more importantly, for us, the business, like every business, I think April and May was really tough. And we saw a huge bounce back in the second half of the year and actually finished the year having grown. In January and February, relative to last January and February pre-pandemic, were well into double-digit growth for us as well. And so we're all systems go. In fact, we just finished an industry hiring cycle where we hired a lot of lateral people in the last several weeks. So the business has actually been quite strong coming back from COVID. And so for that, I see the second question on this page, what does it mean for hiring? We're all systems go with our largest SA program ever. We just wrapped up hiring at INSEAD in the SA cycle, INSEAD, a lot of the European schools. So we're continuing to add to a record size class. And then for full-time recruiting in the fall. And for SA recruiting in the fall, very quickly, our philosophy hasn't changed. We don't want to be disruptive to the campus community. We recognize that flying people from all over the world to a campus may not be the wisest thing to do, regardless of what our school partners say. And we're going to take the same conservative approach to keeping the community, our community and the campus community safe. That doesn't mean we won't be in person. I'm sure, like Lauren, we'll be in person. What you probably won't see is 200 people in a ballroom meeting people. Those days are probably over. But what we'll probably do is smaller, more intimate events within CDC guidelines and within our firm guidelines to make sure that we can meet people in person. But the good news is virtual, I think we proved that it can work. It probably can't be exclusive, that nobody's saying that. But we can actually foster good relationships and broader set of connections than we ever could flying people in from all over the world repeatedly.
Yeah, that makes sense. I see a number of people are posting questions in the
Yep.
chat box or in the Q&A. And what we'll try to do is at the end, we'll try to tackle those. I just want to make sure we have time to tackle the key subjects that we've got on tap today. So by all means, if you have questions, throw them into the Q&A and we'll get to those at the end. But moving right along, I did want to ask Keith if we could just stay with you. This is a question about, like, what do you think people gain from the summer internship? I mean, it's clear from what both you and Lauren have said that the summer can be a great way to gain a full-time job with the organization. But in terms of the skills and knowledge that they gain over that 10-week experience that you provide, how would you summarize those? I think you're on mute, Keith. I'm not hearing you.
Yeah, so like Lauren, this is our full-time conversion rate has been very high every year from the internship to the full-time. Like Lauren, we view it as an on-ramp that's hugely important to us. And so in some ways, giving full-time offers last year we did it at the beginning of the summer, but we mostly do it at the end of the summer anyway, right? And so from that perspective, what we learned last year, and we're excited to do it again this year, is that you really have to think about the summer program as coaching focused and development focused, not evaluative and a test. And what I mean by that is we believe that we hire great people. The process is rigorous. It starts, like Lauren, it's a month-long process. By the time they get that offer, you've got really great people. And what we learned is that we should put them in situations where they can thrive. We expect them to do real work. They work with real clients. They're on real teams, and we expect them to have a real impact. That is table stakes for us. That's expected of every intern. But what we want them to do is learn what their strengths are, learn where their development opportunities are, so that when they do join us full time, they have a good sense of what they need to work on. And they also have a good sense of what it takes to succeed, not just as a consultant, but what it takes to thrive in Bain's culture, and how to build those mentor-mentee relationships that'll sustain them throughout their career. Interns that come in focus on a growth mindset, a personal growth mindset, tend to be more successful longer term than the ones that come in and try and pretend they know everything and they don't need the help. They can just come in and do it. That's not how we work on our teams when they get here full time. So I don't need to see that over the summer. What I want to see is that they ask good questions, they're engaged, they're hardworking, they're learning, and they want to be a contributing member of the team. That's the most important aspect to learn during the summer for me.
Okay. Yeah, excellent. That makes sense. Lauren, how about with you? What do you see as the biggest gains and skills that, students are picking up over the summer?
Yeah, I mean, Keith absolutely hit the nail on the head. We expect pretty much exactly the same from our associates. Now, I just want to add that JP Morgan Chase recruits for 3 different businesses. One, investment banking, which probably many of you on the call are very interested in. Secondly, wealth management. And thirdly, the Chase Associate Program, which ends up being a 2-year rotational program focused, a lot on strategy and management. So there are 3 very different lines of businesses. But yeah, everything that Keith said was absolutely spot on. The only thing that I will add, and something that we expect our interns to do, is definitely become comfortable with the clients. Work on your presentation skills, and that's cross line of business. But also really evaluate. I think Keith basically said we aren't evaluating the candidates, and that's true to an extent. But we certainly expect the candidates to evaluate us. You are all investing a lot to go to business school this fall. You've likely quit your job. You're looking to change careers. And the process, as Keith said, is rigorous. It's very rigorous. Keith and I won't lie to you about that. But you should be really comfortable with where you're going to build your career. So what I always encourage students to do is, if something doesn't feel right, don't accept the full-time offer and leave. We would rather have you intern with us, evaluate us, and after 9 weeks, if you decide this isn't what I want, respectfully walk away. That's okay. And you are not going to be behind the 8 ball to try to get a job elsewhere. So really, really do a lot of, as Keith said, reflection on personal growth. Just reflect a lot about, is this what I want for the next stage of my career? That's hugely important.
Got it. Okay. Good advice. So moving on to full-time roles. Lauren, let's stay with you. And I know it might be a little challenging because you have, as you say, there's the investment banking, there's wealth management, and then there's the rotational program with Chase. But I don't know if you want to pick one or just maybe focus on investment banking. But I feel like one of the things that folks attending would be curious to understand is like, what does it look like? Like, what's a day in the life like for someone who's joined your organization post MBA? And so, I mean, yeah, however you want to break it down, but it'd be interesting to get some insight into that.
Sure. I will quickly talk about kind of what we look for in the interns, just more broadly, and then I can talk. I'll talk a little bit about a life in the life as an investment banking associate. So, what we look for across line of business is absolutely teamwork and leadership skills. Something, and I'll probably touch on it later, but I want to demystify something about financial services, specifically investment banking. You do not need to be a financial whiz to intern with us or join us full time. Leadership and teamwork and collaboration is hugely important. We will train you. If you have the raw skill set and most importantly, the drive to want to do this, we will train you. We will give you the tools. We will give you the resources. I promise you that isn't the issue. So teamwork, leadership, collaboration. For a wealth management business, you have got to be interested. You have to have great sales skills. You have to be what we call a hunter. You can't be afraid to go ask for business and to find new business. That's actually not dissimilar to investment banking either. For our Chase Associate program, you have to think analytically. It's a strategy and management focused business and program. So thinking analytically. I think that's probably, cross line of business, the most important skills that we look for. A day in the life of an investment banking associate does not look different than a day in the life of an ED, an executive director, investment banker. It is very, very similar. And we treat associates very much like we treat lateral hires, because given your prior work experience, you're more readily a value add to the business. You don't need that ramp time. And the same is true for the summer. As soon as interns hit the desk, as we call it, even if you're in a virtual environment, as soon as you join your business or your group, they are going to lean on you. They are going to rely on you to actively participate in projects, conversations, client meetings, whatever it is. And we feel that is so important to give you an organic and authentic view of what it's going to be like when you join full time. So at the end of that 9 weeks, you can fairly assess if this is where you want to join full time. Investment banking associate. I will also be transparent with you. The hours can be long. But we are making huge strides in the industry to have protected weekends, meaning pencils down at 7 o'clock on a Friday night, and you aren't allowed to check your work email or go into the office until Sunday after 12 p.m. So every associate globally has at least one protected week in a month. There is something called an intensity report that the CEO of the investment bank reviews, and everyone is mandated to input their hours for the week. If anyone is above 90 hours, the CEO will call you personally and basically mandate that you leave or be taken off a project. And that is to protect, obviously, the work-life balance of the associate. It's not that you're not competent or capable. We just have such a huge focus right now on prioritizing work-life balance for our associates.
Great. Yeah, that's good to hear. Because I know there are those stereotypes are out there, right? About, well, in both cases, working long hours, right? Post MBA. So Keith, how about you? What about, what's a day in the life like for a consultant?
Yeah, no, I'll keep it relatively brief. To me, the consultant versus the intern are highly overlapping. Okay, and there's 4 things that I would say interns get to experience, and then there's a 5th one that I would add when you're here full time. and it's not as much a day in the life as a week in the life. And I personally tend to think about 7-day chunks of like, what do I have this week? Every Sunday night when I was client facing, I would sort of look at my week and sort of figure out like how the cadence needed to go, so I could get my workouts in, get my family time in, and do all that other stuff while still accomplishing everything that I need to do. Because I have my wife and I just had our 23rd anniversary, and I have two boys, a high school senior and one in college. So I've been at Bain for 25 years, but I've had a family almost the entire time. And so that, figuring out how to do all of it to me was like, okay, let's look, week at a time, month at a time, and figure out how we're going to get it all done. So there's 4 things that we expect, right? In a typical week, you're going to spend a decent amount of time doing analytics. So what is the question that you have? Early in the case, that'll be figuring out what data you need and how you're going to get it. Later in the case, that'll be sort of, mining the insights, et cetera. But you're going to do analytics with probably, a third to half of your time in any given week. You're also going to work with clients. And early on, that's getting the data. Once you get it, you're going to do some things with it. You're going to share it with them and get their insights, because your sort of Bain toolkit and the experience of the firm combined with your client's experience comes together to create the insight. So you're going to work with clients. You're also going to work with the team. And that'll be one-on-one meetings with your supervisor. That'll be typically a case team meeting once or twice a week to review each other's output, ask each other questions, because consulting is a team sport. There's lots of great athletes out there, but if you're not a team sport person, that's a challenge. In terms of your professional and what it is and how you want to work at the firm. And then the 4th thing is there's sort of, I'll say, getting to know the firm and the culture and social events and things like that. So we will do, brown bag lunches for different practice areas. We'll do social outings and social gatherings. So you're getting to experience sort of the analytics, the team, the client, and the firm. And those things are true of everybody, including our interns. The 5th thing is that when you're full-time, you also get a chance to run parts of the firm. So I was on the promotion committee. I led some of our social impact work, even as a consultant and an analyst at the firm, so that, whether it's leading junior achievement or running one of our in-office training programs, when you're here full time, you're doing those first 4 things, plus also helping run part of the business of Bain, which tends to be in areas that people are interested. We call them extra 10%. You volunteer to do other things at the firm. And so a typical day in the life is a blend of those 5 things. And depending on where you are in the project and where you are professionally and what it is that you're trying to build, as I said, build your own Bain, you'll get more or less of that. And then there's a lot of resources to help you figure that out. One of the ways that we train it is it's less about work-life balance and more about finding a way to do the job in a sustainable way, which means over time, shifting your focus and your hours towards things that you like and away from things that drain your energy. Because ultimately, work-life balance isn't a sustainable way to frame the job in my personal experience, because if work is draining all of the life out of you and you need a life outside of work to stay sane, there's probably something wrong with work. And you should actually like what you're doing. You should like the people that you're working with, and you should get energy from the analytics and the insights that you're getting on the job. And that shouldn't be a work-life trade-off. Work should be good and life should be good. My friend, I jokingly tell one of my friends, his company goes to summer hours during the summer, so they get their Friday half days. And I was like, wow, that must be, on the one hand, that looks great for work-life balance, but if he has to come home, if I had to come home and do yard work every Friday, I'd rather be at work, right? And because that's not my thing. And so I feel like people sometimes treat work-life balance where they almost give the high ground. And for your audience that's on the front end of their MBA, they should pick a job that's going to give them energy, not figure out how they're going to manage a job that drains it.
Right. Yeah, excellent point. So speaking of our audience today, I know that one of the biggest questions we see over and over again is like, what do you do when you're heading off to business school to begin exploring your post MBA career? And like, how should people spend their time between now and the start of business school? I know when I went to business school, which is a long time ago, we were just talking about what kind of backpack to buy for that 2 months kind of travel. But now things have really shifted. Candidates today, they're far more organized than I ever was. And they want to know, like, what can I do to get my ducks in a row to land that summer internship or whatever it is. So Keith, I'll stay with you. Curious, like, what advice do you have for folks who they're going to go to business school this fall and they're thinking, what can I do to get ready for that, post MBA job?
Well, I think participating in things that Clear Admit is doing, and a lot of the other resources, so that they can hear from me and hear from Lauren and our peers about what it takes to be successful in the process, is an important part of the journey. And I don't think people, and Lauren, I'm actually interested in how you all approach it, but I don't think there's like, some people want to study and do, how many cases should I do before I get to campus? And, what classes should I take in the fall? And Lauren said it perfectly. Like, we'll train you. Like, you need to come energized and ready to work, and take the time to learn the things that are interesting for you and pursue your passions while you're in business school. You're going to have the rest of your life to work. I don't need you to stress out over the summer. We do experience Bain, like I mentioned. Come to the things you want to learn about, skip the things you don't. We'll see you in the fall. And so my advice would kind of be, chill the hell out. Like, just relax. Like, you have plenty of things to stress about. You shouldn't make up things to stress about on April 28th. That's not a healthy way to pursue this, because we're going to work you when you get here.
Yeah.
Don't start running to the starting line. Goodness, right. You're going to be exhausted.
And let the record show that I did not tell Keith to say that you should come to Clear Admit events. That was unsolicited. But no, I agree. I think, to some extent, that's a great analogy. This idea, like, don't run to the starting line. Save your energy to run when the starting gun goes off or whatever. But what about you, Lauren? What would you say folks could be doing over the coming months before they start business school to kind of get ready?
Keith, I cannot top Keith's answer. That was perfect. Do a lot of self-reflection. Think about what it is that you want. If you walk away from this and say, wow, I have zero interest in ever being an investment banker, then guess what? You learned something. And knowing what you want, what you don't want, is as important as knowing what you want. The recruiting process is rigorous. It's probably not going to be the last time that Keith or myself says that. So going into the fall and saying, you know what, I really want consulting. You are going to put yourself at such an advantage, instead of saying, okay, I'm really torn between consulting, investment banking, the wealth management program at JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs, whatever it is. So I would say really narrowing down what it is that you're interested in between now and the fall. It's not, you will work, and the process will be intense once you start recruiting.
Graham, Lauren pointing out, like, there's 3 different tracks into JP Morgan, and they're different, and they have different skills and different requirements, and can lead to different career paths. Learning that now is huge.
Yeah,
I think that now is huge, and to me, that's the value of these types of events, to do it early and triage when you get to campus in the fall.
Yeah, and you guys are both making a really important point. We see a number of candidates who come to Clear Admit to hang out and learn about business school. And part of that process is they're trying to figure out, okay, schools ask, like, what do you want to do after business school? So they have to write essays about that. And I can tell you that we often see people saying, oh, well, I either want to do banking or consulting. And my first thought is, whoa, stop. Like, figure out what you want, because you're going to just be, and this is a perfect segue into the next question, which is, recruiting is kind of demanding. You both said it's rigorous. It's a demanding process. And you got to think about the fact that you're going to be a full-time student. And so, the question I had, and I guess I'll go with you, Lauren, how do people juggle, right? So, and your answer might be, well, they juggle by figuring out what they want, so they're not interviewing for both consulting and banking at the same time and making their lives really just overloaded. But how do you feel like students should go about prioritizing things? Because they've got homework, classes, clubs, and recruiting. And any tips on juggling all that?
Yeah, definitely. So first and foremost, let me go back to something that Keith said earlier. Your health and your safety is paramount to us and to your schools. So you do not want to burn the candle at both ends and get so sick that you can't go to class and you can't recruit and you can't go to the finance club meetings that you're the president of, and so on and so forth. So don't burn the candle at both ends. So 1, prioritize your health and safety first and foremost. Second of all, prioritize your schooling. I know what it costs to to pursue an MBA. Many of you are, you've taken out hundreds of $1,000s worth of loans. You've maybe uprooted your families to move cross country to be near said business school, whatever it may be. Prioritize your schooling. You are there to learn. You're paying a large premium to be there. So prioritize your schooling. Health, 1, 2, schooling. And thirdly, and anything else. Recruiting could be part of that. If you're not interested in a full-time job, maybe you're not. I think most of you are, but if you're not, then prioritize the extracurricular things such as finance club, rugby, whatever it is that interests you. But if recruiting is really important to you and landing that full-time job, then I would say recruiting should be 2B or 3. It is difficult to juggle, no doubt. But I think, as Graham said, knowing what you want before you start the race, whether it's consulting or investment banking or a strategy program or a management program, knowing what you want come September is going to help you immensely.
Yeah, that's really well said. And I want to ask Keith for his take on this too. And I'll also just add that the schools know all of this and they do a really good job, I think, on the whole, of making time for recruiting.
Yeah.
It's not like, they schedule all your consulting or banking interviews during classes, right? So they create space for this stuff, but it's still a juggle. So Keith, what's your sort of advice on this too?
Yeah, and one of the things we learned during COVID is that you can do a lot of the mass marketing and education on Zoom, right? And so I think the schools will need to update their model for the reality that Lauren and I aren't going to come on October 28th from 5 p.m. Like, I'm going to do a session on Zoom for everybody, and it'll be when it is, and students can either come or not come, but we'll record it. Last year, for example, we decided to do the mass marketing stuff on Zoom because nobody was going anywhere last year. And we did one in the middle of the day, we did one in the evening, and we actually did one midday on a Sunday, just to make sure that everybody, and it was the same session 3 times, but we made sure that everybody could attend one and we recorded it so they could watch it later if they wanted. And so I think we're going to see that recruiting is going to be a little bit more flexible than it had been in the past. Like, the day that we're coming to campus isn't the only day anymore. That's not going to be a thing. I do think that having your priorities, exactly like Lauren said, is the way to do it. When I went to business school, I wanted to have dinner with my wife every night. I wanted to work out every day. I wanted to get to bed at the same time as my wife every night. After that, I did other stuff. And I knew what I wanted to get out of my business school experience. I was also sponsored, so I don't want to mislead people. I didn't have a lot of recruiting commitments because I was coming back to Bain. One thing that I would add to what Lauren said, which I feel is probably consistent, which is just communicate with us what your priorities are. I think we're learning as a firm and frankly as an industry that the choreography and the mating ritual that used to happen every year, in a world where, frankly, there's events like this starting really early, by the time you get to campus, you've learned so much about us. Maybe you don't need to come to that event because it's totally redundant with what you already know. And I think 5 or 6 years ago, we'd look at that and say, Graham didn't even come to our on-campus event. And the answer is because Graham came to 10 other ones during the summer. He doesn't need that event. And so we're learning about that. And that's, again, where I think the schools and the career offices need to update sort of their understanding. When I came through recruiting, the rules were the same as they are now, except since then, we've had Google, we've had the internet, we've had Reddit, we've had all these other places for students to get educated. So by the time they get to campus, if you've already done, if you already know what we're doing in a practice area, you know about the rotation program at a company, and you don't need to go to that information session, let the recruiter know. If they invite you, at least be responsive, like a mature, responsible adult, that you thank you for the invite, but I'm going to sit this one out. That's totally fine with us. But you shouldn't feel pressure to come to everything. That's crazy. I don't want to come to everything.
Yeah, good feedback. And it is true, it hasn't changed that much. And yet, as you correctly point out, there's been a lot of innovations elsewhere. So that's really great feedback. Keith, I want to stay with you. We have a couple of firm specific questions. Sure. So as our audience knows, or maybe doesn't, but one of the things that consulting is known for, it's the strategy consultancies are the use of cases in interviews. So I don't know if you want to just say a few words about that, but also
Yeah.
like if there's any recommendations you have for how to prepare for that. And I recognize we're not telling people to prepare this summer, but
Yeah.
just so they can kind of understand what goes into this.
Yeah,
It'd
so
be good
I'll be
to.
brief. The case interview is a business discussion. I think people over prepare generally for them. Slow and steady wins the race. If you get to campus in the fall and get settled, figure out your way around the campus, and then in October you do one case a week with some friends until we interview in January, you're probably fine. Right. And I hear people saying, I've done 50, how can I get more? I'm like, if you've done 50, you've probably done too many and you don't need any more practice. You need to relax a little bit because then you're scripted. And Lauren, I imagine in your interviews, like you ask people a question and then they just run through the script no matter what. It's like watching politicians speak. It's like, did you even hear? Like, what does that have to do with what I asked you? And it's because they're so amped up and wound up on their script that they're just over prepared. So we have some resources on our website. Through Experience Bain, we'll do a series of case interview sessions. We have some videos on YouTube. And then most campuses have a management consulting club, and you can plug in there. You can work with the second years. That's how I would approach this. And the unique aspect of our recruiting process, the nuances of how our business model as a firm are different than our competitors, that's what ultimately will help you understand whether or not we're a good fit for you. But I wouldn't over prepare for cases. I certainly wouldn't be thinking about them like right now. It's too early.
Okay. Yeah, that's helpful. I think it is that sort of mystery thing that some candidates, don't know a lot about. So I'm glad you touched on it.
We'll demystify during the during the summer. We'll hold a couple of sessions. We'll do an overview of what it is. We'll do a live demonstration so you can actually see an interviewee sort of go through it, and then we'll do some small group breakouts and things like that over the course of the summer. We do that on every campus. The upperclassmen are typically super helpful. I know in consulting and definitely in banking, the ones who were successful last summer want to pay it forward, which is just a good sign of the culture at the places you're joining.
Makes sense. So this next question, I think you kind of preempted earlier today, but I just wanted to, is there anything we need to know about converting an internship to full-time? It sounds like it's almost an automatic, but anything you want to say on this, and also we haven't really talked about this idea that, some folks don't intern with you, but then may show up for full-time recruiting, and anything you want to say about that?
I'll go quickly first. This summer, we converted everybody to full-time up front, so that's not a thing. I won't say whether or not we're going to do that going forward, but every year it's always been over 90% conversion rate. So that's not something people should stress about at all. They should focus on the things Lauren said. Get to know the firm, get to know the job, get to see if it's a good fit. We do know there are people who don't go through full-time recruiting. There's a couple of programs that don't have a summer, and so they show up in the fall brand new to us. We do take pretty seriously if someone has an offer to join us for the summer and turns us down for one of our direct competitors. At that point, we sort of say, well, you've made your decision. You should live with it. But we also know that there are people who want to try tech. This is the one time they can try a startup. This is one time they can try financial services or other industries. And they may try it and decide it's not for them and come recruit in the fall, and that's totally fine. We see that both ways, just like we see people do consulting and go, yeah, 10 weeks was enough. I'm good.
Right.
It's time to call Lauren and see what's going on over there. That's totally fine.
Okay. All right. So good. Yeah. Well said. I think we can move on. I did want to ask, this is a hot topic as well. We see candidates asking about this on our website. Anything you want to say about corporate social responsibility or social impact type work, or the Bridgespan group?
So Bridgespan is a separate company that spun out of Bain in 2000. They're a nonprofit that consults to nonprofits. The DNA is very similar. They're like a sister company. Bain Cap sprung out of Bain the same way in 1985 as a private equity fund. They're not an affiliated company, except for the shared origin stories and the same DNA at some levels. CSR and ESG are big buzzwords, as is our DEI work. I would say for all three of those, what we're seeing is that it is in some ways the new digital. The way we approach digital as a firm was you don't have like a consumer products practice and a retail practice and a digital practice. If you're a retailer and digital is not embedded in your strategy and how you're doing business, it's good. You won't be a retailer very long. And so you can't separate them. And the reality is that when you think about ESG and DEI, those now need to be a part of your strategy. They need to be a part of your operation. You cannot run a factory and not think about how it's affecting the environment. You can't hire people and not think about how diversity is going to play into it. I think the people that we're seeing on campus are demanding accountability to companies. And so for us, the way we think about it is it's tightly integrated. You can't separate it, and it's embedded in all of the work that we're doing. We have to do strategy and operations and org with a lens towards those things, and we've been doing that for a while now.
Okay.
But
Yeah,
there'll
that
be a
makes
lot
sense.
more. There'll be a lot more on the website, but I want to keep that relatively short. I know there's a lot of questions.
Yeah. All right. So one more question I had for you is a lot of MBA students talk about, an interest in tech, but they recognize the benefit of going into consulting as a great way to kind of utilize the toolkit that they pick up in business school. And so there's this idea of, well, I'll go do consulting for a while and then maybe I'll jump to tech. And so my question for you is, how easy is that? And, is Bain, just as schools brag about sending many people off to Bain or something, is Bain able to brag about, we send a lot of people off to, Google or wherever people might want to go to work in tech?
Yeah, I mean, look, the allure of tech has always been there. As somebody with 2 electrical engineering degrees from MIT, I know what the gravity feels like and what the pull feels like. At the end of the day, Bain is about training you to be a general manager. Okay, and whether that's the CEO or running a business unit, we want to build your skill set to do that. We don't specialize you typically from day one. We want you to see a lot of different things, both in terms of industry and type of work, because we want you to build that foundation. We want you to do a rotation in our private equity group and learn how to think like an investor and focus in on the most important things and learn how to, you know, how to draw insights from vague problems in a way that's helpful, because we want you to be running a business. What you see with us, unlike other consulting firms, is most people, the majority of our folks aren't leaving going to Fortune 500 companies, right? There's a big chunk of that, of course, but at Bain, you'll see some people go into startups. You'll see people go into social impact. You'll see people go into mid-cap companies and small-cap companies, because we're actually building a broad skill set that you can apply a lot of different places. So yeah, people do go to tech. We had 2 people running, the person running the grocery business at Amazon was a Bain alum. The person leading different parts of what we're doing at Disney and other places like that are Bain alums. Like, that's totally fine. But we don't think about it as we're preparing you for tech or we're preparing you for social impact or retail consumer products. We think about it as we're building business leaders. And we're a general manager factory, and that's the goal.
Okay, that makes sense. Thanks for sharing those insights on Bain. I want to now turn to Lauren. We have some questions that are specific to JP Morgan. The first of which is just that, I went to business school a long time ago. And even then, investment banking and other finance roles like wealth management have always had this appeal. And what is it that you think makes the work so appealing?
Oh gosh, what makes the work so appealing? I think being able to work with some of the largest companies in the entire world, specific to investment banking, being able to pick up the newspaper and say, "Oh wow, I was part of that IPO yesterday." It's super impactful. I mean, what I don't know what else. I think it's also a very individual experience. A lot of people who join investment banking really investment bankers love to win. That is what they do. They win deals, and so you have to be a little bit competitive for sure. That being said, you're part of a massive team. The investment banking division is a huge global team. Even if you go into a product group or an industry group, a coverage group, you're still going to be working cross. I don't want to say line of business, but I guess cross group. So if you're in the mergers and acquisitions group, which is a very attractive group, you are kind of the jack of all trades, but the master of none. If you're in the media and communications group, that's when you're really able to form relationships with your clients. We see a lot of people that end up going to work for our clients because they end up forming such great relationships with them. So that's, I know it's not super prescriptive, but I think it's a very individual experience. Why investment banking? Something that I think is very attractive about JP Morgan in general is the culture, and that starts at the top with our chairman and CEO, Jamie Dimon. We have a really great culture, despite some of the myths about investment banking and the long hours. It's a very collaborative, a very innovative culture, and again, that starts with leadership.
Makes sense. Yeah. I guess the next question I had for you is one that I think you kind of preempted as well. Both you and Keith kind of spoke to this, but is there anything that you wanted to say further about, students who want to, like, if they show up as a second year MBA looking for a job and they did not intern with you, are there any that you take? I mean, how's that kind of viewed?
Yeah, absolutely. We certainly take them. I just think it's a little bit more competitive. You're now talking about 2 or 3 spots per group or per product or coverage, and 2 or 3 spots instead of anywhere from 60 to 80. So I think it's just a little bit more competitive. We have absolutely taken folks for our full-time class that didn't intern with us, and they were at Google for the summer, or they are an engineer of some sort, and they didn't even have an internship.
Mhm.
So we're not completely dead set on you have to have an investment banking or any sort of finance background, degree, internship, prior experience. It has certainly happened. It just, our biggest feeder into our full-time class is that internship program.
Okay, good to know. Another question for you, and I'm kind of putting you on the spot, but are there any courses that, finance focused MBA students should take? And, I'm thinking particularly of, there's kind of the MBA student who was an undergraduate business student who did finance as their major. And so they've kind of, they can pass right into elective coursework in many MBA programs. But then there's also maybe the liberal arts grad or someone who, didn't really do much finance before business school. But any advice on how they navigate the curriculum? Or would you just say, look, take the core curriculum, it's got all that stuff in it that we would need anyway? Or is there any advice you'd have on that stuff?
I definitely think for someone who did not have a finance undergrad degree, I think it's obviously important to, go through the core curriculum, but I would really try to get some sort of accounting basic understanding that first year of your MBA. Specifically, if you want to go into investment banking. That is not true for wealth management or a Chase associate program. If you want investment banking, and even if, I know some schools don't even offer accounting that first semester. If you can do some accounting work on your own, I think you will see that puts you at an advantage when it comes to interview time.
Yeah, I once heard, I guess it must have been my accounting professor when I was complaining about, because I wasn't really a finance person, but I was kind of complaining. He said, oh, but, accounting is the language of finance, and you're not going to be able to, if you want to do finance, you got to know the language. And so luckily, many MBA programs do allow you to do the accounting stuff in that first semester. Although you're right, there's some that have it shifted into the second because they want to balance out all the quant work. But that's really good advice. I think, yeah, excellent. So the next question I have for you is about longer term career paths. What do people do? Let's say I become an associate in investment banking, or go into wealth management or the Chase program. What's the long term sort of career prospects? I mean, we do hear people talking about wanting to use a banking job to eventually get into private equity or venture capital or something. But what do you see folks doing in the long run?
Again, very, very personal, very individualized experience. I will say that career, and you'll hear Jamie Dimon say this quite a bit, careers are not linear. So if you commit to coming to JP Morgan as an associate, and, typically it's a 2.5-year program before you're graduated to that VP. If you decide, and it is very possible to go into private, PE or VC, private equity or venture capitalism, it happens a lot. I guess, and there's never any, it's no skin off of our back. Everyone needs to do what they have to do. But I will say, the upside of working at a place like JP Morgan Chase, we have 252,000 employees worldwide. We are the largest financial institution on planet Earth. I have seen some of the best investment bankers, wealth management advisors, Chase associates who graduate to be MDs. Some of the most successful people I've ever worked with have stayed at Chase for a number of years. We have 6 different lines of business. Jamie Dimon calls them his 6 children. Some days, he says he likes one child better than the other. But there's just so many, there's just so many opportunities. I think hugely attractive for me personally is we're global. And so many people I know have done investment banking in Sydney, in London, and North America, and Toronto. I think before leaving JP Morgan and pursuing PE or VC, I would encourage anyone to explore. And it's not just JP Morgan. Bain, whether it's consulting or Goldman Sachs is a wonderful company, and they have a global footprint as well. Bank of America, so many of our direct competitors are just these massive global powerhouses, and I know there's a lot of opportunity. So before going down that route, I would probably encourage folks to look internally first and foremost.
Okay, great. So I recognize we're coming up on the top of the hour and we've kind of run a little bit long. I just had a couple of lightning round questions. Are you guys able to stay for 5 extra minutes, or do you guys have to run?
Nope.
I'm seeing Lauren's good. Hopefully Keith is as well. All right. So, we talked about how a lot of recruiting went remote. And so, Lauren, one key tip for virtual interviewing.
Record yourself. Practice and record yourself before you actually do it.
Okay. Keith, how about you?
I don't have it here. I moved the windows up next to the camera, so it looks like I'm looking at the camera making eye contact. For the first 6-7 months of the pandemic, I had a little smiley face on a Post-it that I stuck to my camera, and I always presented to the smiley face.
That's really good advice. And in fact,
virtual eye contact.
Yeah, and there's some computers where the webcam is kind of not in a great spot.
Yeah,
so you're just not looking at the right place. So yeah, that's great advice. All right, next lightning round question. Lauren, back to you. What is one recruiting pet peeve that you have? Like something that candidates do that kind of bugs you?
Not involving the recruiters and going straight to the business or the school. So if there's an issue with the recruiting process, we don't know what we don't know. So if you don't tell us, we don't know. Just be transparent with us. And also if you're dropping out of our process because, whoa, investment banking absolutely is not for me, don't ghost us, please. Just say it's not for me. We'd rather know.
Okay. Yeah, you want them to say, it's not you, it's me. Okay. Well, that's noted. Keith, how about you? What's a pet peeve?
I'll speak for myself on this. People who put Microsoft Office as a skill on their resume in 2021. Unless you're trying to beat out an underperforming second grader, I'm going to assume you can use word processing.
Very good. I had my first boss when I graduated from college. I made the mistake of putting that I knew how to use email on my resume. Again, I'm older, but it was like relatively
That was a thing.
And he literally in the first interview with me said, "Okay, you can put your pants on in the morning too. I don't care about that." So good advice. All right. So final lightning round question. I think there were just 3. Give me a stereotype that you'd like to debunk, Lauren, about kind of finance and banking.
I said it earlier, but you don't have to be a financial whiz to work anywhere at JP Morgan Chase. You have to have the drive. We'll train you. Got
it. Okay. Keith, how about you? Anything you want to debunk?
That we only seek to give advice and sell work, not actually make a difference with the work that we're doing. That's what gets us out of bed every morning. Not every firm is like that, but I can only speak for the one I've been at for 25 years.
Okay, excellent. So the last thing I wanted to do, I know we have a bunch of questions, and I saw that Keith was diligently kind of ticking some of those off. Yeah. So I don't know, Mike, if there are any questions that you wanted us to kind of tackle here as we wrap up.
Graham, I saw there were a bunch of questions about applications from sort of non-T15 schools. Last time I pulled the data, I didn't pull it last year, but we typically have between 50 to 60 MBA programs represented in our consulting class. So we go way deeper than I think most people give us credit for in terms of the rankings. What I can say, like I said in the type question response, if you don't apply, you definitely won't get the job.
Yeah. And actually, I can attest, Keith and I recorded a podcast episode for the Cleared Myth podcast a couple of years ago at this point. But even then, you were talking about how, sure, there are schools that send a lot of people to Bain, but that you're always looking for, others, like you're open to anybody that wants to apply, and great advice. You cannot get a job somewhere if you don't apply for it. I don't know if there was anything else, Lauren, that you saw in the Q&A that you wanted to have the stage here to address briefly before we kind of wrap.
I saw a lot of questions about international students and sponsoring. For JP Morgan, our investment banking division does sponsor, as well as wealth management. Our Chase Associate program does not.
Okay, so that's good to know. The last thing I wanted to mention is that we're conducting a survey right now of folks who've gotten into business school. We're trying to provide some feedback to business schools themselves about how candidates decide where to attend. So you can see a link on your screen. We're actually giving out some Amazon gift cards. If you're one of the folks who participate, we're going to give out 20 cards. So please take this survey if you're currently holding an offer to business school for the fall. I did really want to thank both Lauren and Keith for all of their time. You guys have been so generous. And I know we had a lot of specific questions about your firms. And so hopefully you didn't feel too on the spot. But I think it's just so useful for candidates to hear from you directly. I know that, on some levels, we're telling them, hey, relax, enjoy the fact that you got in. But I think to the extent that they can do some reflecting over the summer about what they want, I always tell people, if you can arrive at business school with a clear plan in terms of what you're hoping to do after business school, you'll just be so much the better for it, because you'll know what resources to take advantage of, who to recruit with, et cetera. So Keith and Lauren, thank you so much for making time. It was a pleasure to hang out for a little while and hear your insights.
Thanks for having us. Nice meeting you, Lauren.
Yeah, great to meet you. Best of luck.
Bye-bye.
All right. And everyone, we're going to continue to do events like this, so stay tuned to clearedmint.com. You'll get all the insights that you need there about how to sign up for future events. We have a bunch of workshops we're doing over the whole summer. So stay tuned. Okay. And thanks everyone for joining us. It was a real pleasure to have everybody here.